got the call at approximately lunchtime, and it was one of those calls that rocks your world. It's a call that you can't ever unhear. And that call came in a way that produced a significant amount of shock in my life, a significant amount of fear, a significant amount of, oh no, what next? What's going to happen now? And I took that call and stood there in sort of this awkward, uncertain, unknown place. And to back up a little bit, just about a week before, I had gone to see my family doctor, my internal medicine doctor, and I had complained a little bit about what I thought was sort of pressure in my prostate. And I also felt like, this is going to be a brutally honest session. I also felt like I had weird hemorrhoid things going on. And I'm in my 50s, and I thought, well, this is just part of the aging process. And I went and saw the doctor, and he bent me over, and he did an exam, and he said, there's nothing, your prostate seems normal, and there's no hemorrhoids. But he said, there is some blood. And he said, I need you to go get a colonoscopy. And he sent me down the hall to the colonoscopy doctor, and they, as luck would have it, had a opening in the next few days. So I started the liquid Drano process, and that liquid Drano process was lovely and delightful. And what's interesting for me is that I've never been in the hospital in my entire life, except the day I was born, and to visit people. So I had no experience of this process, and I was freaked out by it to begin with. My dad and mom have never really had any major illnesses. I've never spent a lot of time. I did spend some time with my grandpa years ago before he passed. And so this whole experience of going to the hospital kind of freaked me out. And so I went for the colonoscopy, and when I was done with the colonoscopy, as I was sort of partially coming to, Dr. Deebs, who was the physician who was doing my colonoscopy, sat beside the bed, and I was kind of groggy, and apparently, previous to that, I was talking loudly to everyone in the room. And Becky would attest to that. And I'm not a loud talker. I'm just not. I'm very quiet. But apparently I was quite loud that day. So, but he sat down beside the bed, and he said, we've got there's a couple things we need to tell you. First, we found in your colon, we found a polyp, and it was up in that top sort of left zone, in the top left area. And he said, we're going to get that checked out. And he said, then we found this other thing that concerns us a little bit, and it's actually right in your rectum. And there's a mass in your rectum that we want to get checked out. But he said, just because you're here, we're going to do some blood work, and we're going to get you a CT scan. Let's get you down and get a CT scan. So went down and had the CT scan, and then went home, knowing that there was something going on, but not quite sure what it is. The next day is when I got the call. And the next day was one of those days, like I said, I was anticipating the call, but I wasn't anticipating what was going to happen in that call. And Dr. Deebs called me, and he says, well, I've got a couple of things to tell you. He said, good news, and the good news is that polyp that we found on the colon, it's fine, nothing wrong with that. He said, but that mass in your rectum, there's some concern with that one, and in our biopsy we found this, cancer. And that word is a word that I've heard, I've used, I've talked to, I've had many conversations about cancer with people. I know people with cancer. But at this point in time, that word became my word. And when that word becomes your word, it changes things somehow. It kind of gets in your skin, and it gets underneath you. And there's a reason why this thing scares people to death. Because when it becomes your word, it changes you. It begins to infect you in a way that's not just your body, but your mind, your emotions, your spirit. And it has this effect that it kind of gets deep inside you. And then within that thing, there's this great deal of uncertainty about what's going on. Nicholas Nassim Taleb wrote a book called The Black Swan. And that book was a really important book. It's been noted as probably one of the top books of the last century. And what he talks about is the effects of in the financial markets was where predominantly he talked about this thing. And in it he talks about the fact that a black swan is an unpredictable, rare, but an often extreme impact event. It's something that shows up and that seemingly comes out of the blue, but it's because it's so rare. And in my life, this was rare. My dad just 2 years ago had his first colonoscopy at 75. There's been no history of cancer in my family, none that I can even find anywhere. I live an extraordinarily healthy life. I live in Southern California. I have the option to almost any good kind of quality food that you can get, and for some strange reason, this unpredictable black swan event shows up in my life. So when a black swan event shows up in your life, guess what happens? You go into a whirlwind. And when cancer becomes your word and you get into the hospital and the medical system, then things start to happen. And if you've ever been in some kind of medical situation where you get into the stream of it, you realize how complex and crazy, and there's a whole different reality in that world that just completely pulls you forward. And Becky and I started being pulled forward. So we met the surgeon almost within less than a week. We met the surgeon. From the surgeon, we went to an oncologist. From the oncologist, we went to the radiation oncologist. From those, I started going into MRIs and CT scans and blood work and PET scans. And as this progresses, one of the things in the medical system is once you get in, you're constantly being pulled forward in it. Because now you're in the system. And once you're in the system pulls you forward because they want to deal with this. And, the insurance gets involved and the insurance approves and everything kind of keeps moving forward. And it's this whirlwind effect. And, I own a web marketing company, and, Dr. Google is someone who I kind of started to get to know a bit more. And you start going into the whirlwind of figuring out what the heck is going on with you and all the myriad of treatments that are available to you. And it becomes this massive whirlwind. And you get stuck in it, you get pulled into it. And for the next couple of weeks, it was just one of those blurs. I don't remember much of it, it was such a blur. When the doctors talk, they seem to talk like at 3 times the speed. Have you ever been in a doctor's office when you think you're trying to hear what they're saying, and you're still stuck on the word they said 3 minutes ago, and they're zooming forward? And that's what it was like. And in that situation, this is what began to happen. Everything that was going till then stopped. Every plan that was made, every plan that we had, all the business stuff that was happening, all of a sudden came to a grinding halt because the future doesn't matter anymore when you have a word like cancer that you've taken on and adopted. And so everything stopped at that point, and all the plans, all the thinking, all of the goals, all of the stuff, because all that mattered at this moment was get better. Figure out how to get better. The great American philosopher Mike Tyson once said, "Everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face." And Tyson said this in response to a reporter who was asking him about, I forget who it was, I don't know if it was Holyfield or whoever he bit the ear off of. Who was that? But they had been asking him about this particular fight, and Tyson comes back and basically said, well, yeah, he's that kind of way, but everyone, even him, has a plan until I hit him. Like when I hit him in the face, the plan changed. And this diagnosis became the punch in the face. Because we had lots of plans. We had a lot of stuff that we were planning in our lives, and they came to an immediate halt. But after 2 weeks of running like crazy in the whirlwind, Becky and I agreed we had to slow this down. We actually had to stop and take stock of what was going on and slow everything down so we could actually comprehend it, understand it enough to make some rational decisions. Because in the whirlwind, it's impossible to make rational decisions. It's very hard to do. And so we slowed it down, we deliberately slowed down things, and we went back and re-talked to the doctors, this time asking them questions that we had learned in the past week. We fired an oncologist and got a new one because we hated him. He was a class A idiot. And we got one that we actually liked. And we talked again to other doctors. We made sure we understood the test results, and we brought it all down and slowed it down to the point we understood what to do so we could make some decisions. And we made some decisions. Early November, I started radiation treatment. With rectal cancer and with the type of cancer that I have and have experienced, instead of doing chemotherapy first, instead of doing surgery first, which often happens a lot of times in the colon, what they do is they actually start with radiation, and they radiate this tumor in order to shrink it, so that when they do surgery, they get the best possible result from that surgery. They're working with the smallest possible tumor. And so I started radiation. It was 28 straight days of radiation. At the same time, I did chemotherapy, oral chemotherapy, for those same 28 days. And if you've heard about chemotherapy, you know it has side effects, and so does radiation, and it's cumulative. It starts to pile up after a while. And for me, the pile-up effect was nausea, it was fatigue, extreme fatigue. Janelle, who works for me, bought me a blow-up mattress that I put in the office, and so if I got nauseous and I hadn't had enough crackers, I was like a pregnant woman. And so I'd stand or sit at my desk and I'd eat crackers all day long, and I'd drink ginger tea, and I took all the advice I could from other women who had had babies to help me through this process. But if I got over the point, I would lie on the mattress that Janelle had given me on the floor of the office, and in that process, I was able to stand it. But as the side effects grew, there's a side effect with the particular drug I was taking called hand and foot syndrome. And hand and foot syndrome tends to affect, the best way I can understand it is the chemotherapy, as the chemotherapy works in your body, it tries to get rid of it, and it goes to your hands and feet. In my particular case, my feet felt like this. Every time I walked, I felt like I was walking on shards of broken glass. And I can only imagine you could understand how everything else in your world disappears when that becomes your daily life. Right? You don't think about business. I mean, even though I showed up to the office and laid on the floor and drank ginger tea and ate crackers, my brain wasn't there. I was in this word that was now my word, trying to figure that out. I was dealing with the punch in the face and the black swan that had shown up in my life. 5 weeks ago yesterday, I went in for significant surgery. And in this surgery, sorry to be graphic and blunt, but this is exactly what happened. They take out all the rectum just above the anus, right back to the rest of the colon, and then they reattach the colon back to what's left at the bottom. They attach it together, and just for fun, they add this extra thing. So this is called an ostomy, or in my case, an ileostomy, and at the end of the small intestine, they cut a hole in your stomach and they bring the small intestine out. I thought maybe they put a valve on there or something. There's no valve. It's just your small intestine sticks out of your stomach. It's kind of fun. It's weird. Let me give you an example. So here's the colon. And right here is where the small intestine catches it, right there. Right? And so just for example, imagine this is your skin, and out from your skin comes your intestine. It just sticks out. And you know how when you have regular bowel movements, you kind of control everything? You know that? You got some control. Well, in this particular case, you don't have control because really there's no valve. So what happens is this little mechanism, this is just a bag. It's like, we call it a pouch, so it doesn't sound as kind of weird. But it's a lovely little pouch, and this pouch attaches to this thing holding out, and then your intestine, if you haven't learned this before, it just pushes stuff all day long. It just pushes things through. So whatever you take in here, within about an hour and a half to 2 hours is coming out there. And then every 2 hours you have to go like this and undo this thing and empty it. But it's happening all the time. So if you hear weird noises from around me, it's just part of life now. But this is what happens when these kind of things transpire. And I'm saying this to you because I want you to know that as you consider, and I'm telling you my situation, but this is what happens in life, is we get hit with a punch. And we have to deal with it. And I'm explaining it to you in a way so you can make sense of it. So that was the surgery. I was 5.5 hours in surgery, a couple hours in recovery, and then a whole week in recovery. And as you might imagine, life stops. It just stops. And you try and figure out what's next. Well, what's next? 5 weeks ago, I finished surgery. On Monday this week, I start my next round of chemotherapy. The cool part about the biopsy results is they tested 15 of the lymph nodes around the tumor that they took out and the fat that came out, and there was no cancer in the lymph nodes. Yay. The margins is the actual ring around where they cut, and they test every part of the cut to make sure there's no cancer there, and the margins were clear. Yay. The dilemma was that the tumor itself was still actively cancerous that they took out. So as kind of the stamp on insurance, we're going the next step. And Monday I start the next round of chemotherapy, which is 18 weeks long, which is the first of every cycle. There's 6 cycles. The first of every cycle I do IV treatment, and then I do oral the rest of the time. And then I get a week break, and then I do the cycle again. They're 3-week cycles. And that's where I'm going. Now, I'm not telling you this, I'm not sharing this so that you feel anyway sorry for me. That's not why I'm doing this. I wouldn't be here if I asked for that, if I needed that or wanted that. Because a lot of people ask, how am I doing? They ask me, how am I doing? And you know what? Frankly, I am great. I am probably better than I've ever been. Yeah, this sucks. You know, I'm pooping right now. You know, it's kind of fun because you lose all sense of dignity because you just go, oh, okay, yeah, that's happening. That's interesting. But besides that, you know, my body feels weird and I still got scars and I'm tired a lot, and at night I have to crash pretty early, and I come to conferences and I don't like crashing early. I like to keep up with Ev. And that's hard to do. But, you know, I'm tired a lot. And yeah, that's part of it. But the other part of it is my business is as good as ever, if not better. And I want to tell you a little bit about that because I've learned some stuff from that. Personally, this has been probably one of the most profound gifts of my life, what I've experienced in the last 6 months. It's something that will forever change me. It already has changed me, but it's something that I wouldn't ever wish on you, but I want to give you some of the secrets and some of the lessons that come from that. So my intention and goal for today is really a couple of things. The first one is, you know, sometimes families need to sit and have a stronger conversation. Sometimes we just chatter about meaningless stuff and politics and stuff like that. When in reality, sometimes we need to have the conversation that we don't normally have. And today's conversation is about that. We don't normally talk about these kind of things, but you know what? You're my family. I've been part of this community for almost 15 years, I think probably more than that. I have such deep and profound friendships in this community. I have coaching clients, we have web marketing clients, we have a whole community of people. I launched my book at the NAID conference. I've been a part of NAID for a long time, and you're family to me. And so it's important that in this moment with my life, I recognize that as family, I want to tell you my story so that you can learn from it. We talk about a lot of stuff at NAID conferences. We talk about sales, we talk about marketing. I've done more than my share of marketing and leadership presentations. We talk about operations. We talk about new ways to grow our business, added enhanced services like medical waste. You name it, we talk about it all here, but we don't often talk about this really hard stuff. We don't often have the kind of conversations where we bare our souls and talk about the stuff that's not easy to talk about. Frankly, we don't want to talk about it. It's hard stuff. But today is, I think, an important day to talk about it. So as a result, if you read your brochure, the agenda items for today's session, you will recall that I actually promised you to leave today with a personal disaster preparedness roadmap. Do you remember seeing that? So I'm going to give that to you, but I'm going to give it to you in sort of I think, an interesting way. I didn't tell you I'd give you the route. I just told you I'd give you the map. Because the route is very much dependent on the life that you're going to live. But if I can give you sort of the lay of the land a little bit, I'm going to give it to you in 3 concepts. The first is professional, which is your expertise, your capabilities, your ability, the role you play in your business and life, the type of work you do, your expertise. The second is your business, which is the entity that you own or manage or run. I want to talk a little bit about some of the things I learned related to my crisis in that. And then finally, I want to finish up with some of the personal stuff. I'm going to run through this relatively quickly. We don't have a lot of time. I wish I had more time. I could spend hours talking to you, and I'm willing to talk to you later today if we catch each other and you want to talk about any of these things. I'm happy to do so. But I want to talk about each of these, and if you want to add it to a piece of paper, this is what I do. I'd make like a checkbox like this, professional business, and I'm going to talk about 3 things in each of the 3 categories just to give you some ease of understanding. And that's a good way for you to remember it, sort of a tic-tac-toe box. I'm going to start with professional. And these, again, are things I've learned along the way. They're things that were from my experience, but I hope they'll be helpful for you. The first one is this. From a professional perspective, and as people who own businesses, run businesses, are involved in businesses, one of the things we do in this is we kind of prepare ourselves for disaster. And if you're like me and you're like Becky and I in any way, as you prepare yourself for disaster and you think about your life, especially as you age, as you get into your 40s and 50s, you start going, well, what happens if? And you kind of put that out in your mind. And what you recognize when you put it out in your mind is that you're planning for your eventual demise. Right? You're actually thinking about what happens if I die. And so Becky and I have been through the whole process of sitting with an estate person and sitting with legal counsel and working through this whole process to build our plan for the future. And interestingly enough, the plan for the future tends to focus on death, not on staying alive. And so when you think about it, you think about the insurance you have. You think about the structures you have in place in your business and in your personal life. It's quite likely, if you dig in far enough, you'll realize that most of the stuff that you've got planned and prepared for is if you kick off, not if you stick around. And that's a little scary because this is actually from the Critical Illness Association. And here's what they found, that a male 40 years of age or older is 5 times more likely to suffer a critical illness, which includes cancer, heart attack, or stroke. Those are the 3 biggies right now. Cancer, heart attack, and stroke. You're 5 times more likely as a male 40 or older to suffer one of those than to die. And yet all of the planning we do is for death. Women 40 or older are 4 times more likely to suffer from critical illness than to die. And yet all of our planning is around death. When you get to 55, and this is the scary part, right? When you get to 55, you're 8 times more likely to suffer one of those 3 critical illnesses, or 6 times as a woman, than to die. Now, I'm not telling you that to freak you out, but here's the dilemma that we faced, is that all of the planning we had done did not account for me being offline from my business for 6 months or longer, did not account for the impact that would have. There's no insurance to support that kind of stuff. It's all if I died. And so from that perspective, I think it's really important, and I'm talking just purely in the most simplistic ways. As a person who has a life, who has a business, who runs a world, who deals with daily stuff, please make sure you're aware of your professional and your personal planning for disaster. When you start thinking about disaster, think in terms of staying alive, not necessarily dying. Make sure you talk to your legal people. Make sure you talk to your insurance people. Becky and I are re-evaluating all this stuff given what just occurred. and what continues to occur in my life. Because if you're not aware of that stuff, you tend to miss it, and then all kinds of weird stuff happens. So that's the first thing I want to, and that's a very practical one. But here's the second one. In my office and on my desk, and I actually brought it for you, I have a mug that says, Tom Adams, Chief Don't Do It Yourself Officer. Myself officer. Right? And this, I put this on my desk, it's been on my desk for about 8 years, and it's for this very reason. It is so extraordinarily easy in your business, in the role that you play, to become the person who does things. Now, it's not that doing things is an important part of your business. It's a critical part of your business. But what happens is, and I'm talking to owners specifically today, or people in management roles, it's very easy for you to get pulled back into doing the operational stuff of your business. And in the event that something unforeseen and you get punched in the face at some point, or a black swan shows up, and you've spent your time and energy doing stuff in your business is hamstrung by you. And the more that you do that stuff, the more you play those roles in your business, the more you become the person who is doing the stuff because nobody else does it as well as you do, and nobody else is as smart as you, and nobody else, and if I have to teach it to them, it's a pain. But there's all these places in your business, if you watch yourself and you observe yourself, you discover that you're doing stuff that in the event of a crisis becomes the thing that now blocks your company. I'm pretty thrilled to say that we spent a lot of time working on this. We have standard operating procedures coming out the wazoo in our company. For pretty much every activity that we do, we've got a process that we work through. I have a team that is so solid in this regard. And so for me, we got lucky on this one because I wasn't planning this. I wasn't planning this for my eventual Black Swan event. I was planning this to have a better business. But what I got as a result was this really cool benefit that when I was diagnosed 6 months ago and when I started going through this whole process, I didn't have to start releasing a ton of things. Yes, there's a ton of things I still have to release. I still have my grubby little hands on things that I won't let go of. And I hold on to those tight. And Janelle will tell you if you ask her, there's things that she wishes I would let go of. Because, you know what? When I was offline and I couldn't talk to anyone, couldn't have a conversation with anyone, when I was out cold in the hospital, my team did great. In fact, they were pretty happy for me to be away. Because they actually accomplished things without my intervention, which screws it up mostly. Right? They're doing good work. And so from my lips to yours, especially as an owner of a business, as a manager, have your team do all the operational stuff, all the things in your business. Yes, as an owner, as a senior manager, you have to make decisions a lot of the time, but are you teaching your team to think properly so they can make good decisions? So that when those things come along, they don't need to come to you all the time. Release yourself from this more and more. Become the Chief Don't Do It Yourself Officer in your organization. And here's the secret way to do this, and it's pleasurable at the same time. Vacation. Now, if you as the owner of a business or a senior manager in a business can't take a 2-week vacation where you have zero contact with your team, zero contact with them, and that means no phone, no text, no email, no checking email, go offline completely. Get away completely. And if you're able to get away completely, you're getting the benefit of a vacation, but you're also ensuring your team knows how to function without you. And in the event that something happens that isn't delightful, that is kind of a mucky situation, your team knows how to deal with it. Does that help? Does that make sense? Next. In your world and in your life as a professional, when stuff hits, you got to have somebody you can call. And so this is going to be twofold. There's two elements to this particular one that I want to talk about. The first one is, within your organization, have you determined and developed sort of your senior team? And by senior team, I mean the people who will be charged with making the decisions. who, in the event that you're unavailable to be present to them, they can make decisions that you support and that you stand behind. And in my case, in my web vitality company, Janelle, who's here with us today, and Sawyer, my son, who have both been with the company for a long time, are my trusted leaders in the company. And as things come up, they were fully capable. And before I went into surgery, I told them, whatever happens, you guys can make these decisions. You know what? You know how I think. You know how I act. Make the decision you need to make in these cases. I will stand by it. And they did. They always have. And that's never been the issue. But it's really important that you know who you're going to call as your internal team to make these things happen. But the second piece of this puzzle is one that I also want to address. So it's your internal team, but it's your external team as well. And one of the things that happens in crisis is it's very easy to go offline and to kind of go into yourself and into your world. And one of the things that happens, especially as a professional who operates and runs a business, is there is this need in your team, there's this need by you and your family to have external resources that you can rely on, that you can count on. So do you have in place, there's that book which is called Dig Your Well Before You're Thirsty. Do you remember that book? Which is building connections before you need them, building relationships before you need them. In this case, I believe it's building your team before you need it. So in my case, it was, I have a coach. I have an executive coach, and I eat my own dog food as an executive coach. I buy executive coaching. I pay for it because I want to be someone who always has someone looking over my shoulder to help me make good decisions. And so during this crisis, that was the one relationship I went to, and I said, I need this to be solid. We need to be in good, we need to be communicating. I went to, as much as I was in the medical system, the traditional medical system, I went and started working with a naturopathic doctor, because the medical system tends to focus on the disease, and the naturopathic community tends to focus on health. And so I wanted both sides of this equation, right? So I needed to build my team over there. I needed to build in our family who are going to be the points of contact that when information needs to be distributed through the process, we weren't trying to communicate with everybody, we were communicating with certain somebodies. And we had built a team in advance. Now, I had the luxury of being diagnosed and going through a chemotherapy and radiation treatment that didn't take me out completely. It took me out enough, but we had the chance to build it. But one of the things I learned from this process is you have to have a team of resource people that you can rely on when this happens. And if you're not ready for that and you get taken out, if you don't have that team in place, who can your staff call to support them? Do they know who your legal counsel is? Do they know the people in your business world that can help them to make decisions if they're stuck? This is stuff that we don't think about. And now that I'm so close to this action, I want to remind you this is important stuff to be aware of. So those are 3 professional learnings I've had in the last little bit. But that professional learning leads very quickly into business stuff for the business itself. And here's the first one. The first one is in case of emergency. And this is one that, having talked to many business owners, and I spend a lot of time talking to business owners, people who run businesses, this one is grossly, sorely lacking in most of our lives. And it's this. In the event that something drastic happens to you, does anyone, anywhere, know the keys to the kingdom? Does anyone know what to do if something happened to you? Where do they go? Who do they talk to? What's your passcode to get into your computer? I know it's 123 or something like that. But, maybe you just got crazy one day and added an F to the end or something. Right? So does anybody know even how to access your computer? Can somebody get into your email to see what's happening from an email perspective? Can anyone do anything? Now, I'm not suggesting you make a document that you put out on the main shelf in your business, and so everybody has access to it. It might need to be that in case of emergency, you have a documented place, either digitally or physically, that is held by your significant other. And in the event that something happens to you, that document is delivered then to your key team leader, and you've actually addressed this in advance. this is a piece of our puzzle, my puzzle, that I feel like we missed. Because if something had happened that was not, now Becky and I are partners in the business, and we have an exceptionally great team, but you know what? Nobody can access my email. I mean, Janelle could probably get to it if she had to, and she'd hack her way into it because she's that good. But she could get in there. But all the other stuff, like what happens if? And I don't think we ask this question enough. What happens if something goes wrong? How do we get there? Years ago, I helped companies in the records management space build what I call disaster recovery plans or disaster response plans. But I specifically in the agreement said these were marketing plans. These were not legitimate ones. These were just to show potential clients that you had done the work of preparing this. And what it was a document that they could show their client that specifically had every single contact that related to what happens in the case of fire. Who's the contact related to the sprinkler system? Who's the contact related to all of the facets of the building? Who's the contact related to if you had water in boxes? All of that stuff had to be created in a documented format that was physically able to be handed to a potential client to say, this, we've done the work, we've done the preparation. So in case of emergency, I'm just going to ask you, are you prepared? If this were to happen to you, do you have the document that you can hand to your key team leader that could then make the calls, make the kind of conversations, access the kind of information that would help the business proceed after that in case of emergency? Next, and this is one I know, nobody wants to talk about this, but we're going to talk about it anyways. Succession plan. Or lack thereof. A succession plan is, what do you plan to do with your business? And you know, it's kind of interesting because most people who build businesses have an intention around them. One intention is to pass it on, especially smaller businesses tend to be the businesses that are passed on to family members. And in other cases, their plan is to sell them at some point in time. That's generally the two streams. And even in larger businesses, the intention is to pass it on to the next round of executives to manage it, or to ultimately sell the organization to a third party. That's generally the theme of succession planning. But here's the interesting thing. CNBC and Financial Planning Association did a survey, and the average business owner, of the average business, 78% intended succession, but only 30% had a plan for it. Nobody's building succession planning. 1 in 3, or less than 1 in 3, are actually doing that. Right? So everybody thinks about this, but they don't do anything with it. And I'm the same way. I am now in my 50s. I have gone through the punch in the face, and I recognize at this time I don't have a succession plan for my business. Like I think about it. We talk about it. I go, well, at some point I could sell it, or at some point I could pass it on to my family. But I have never gone down the path of going, how is that going to happen? What's the process going to entail? What's it going to mean for me? Here's an interesting one. Business owners who had a net worth of $1 million, this was done by, didn't write it down, it was done by U.S. Trust, did a study of business owners with a net worth of $1 million or more. 2/3 of them, 66%, had no succession plan in place. Now, the interesting thing about this is if you've got $1 million in net worth, already you've got a substantial business starting to operate on your behalf. It's not a one-person operation generally at that point. You've built enough flow and capacity to develop your asset base and develop a net worth. 66 had no succession plan in place. And do you know the reason that they stated for this? They don't want to think about it right now. We don't want to think about it right now. And the reason we don't do this work is because I'm this person. I want to think about it. I got plans. I got big plans. There's so many cool things happening. We got all these next things we're going to do. And yet as we think about the succession plan, what happens if you get punched in the face? What happens? What are you going to do? What happens to your staff? What happens to your family who relies on this income? What happens when you get the black swan event in your life? And if you're not thinking about this, I'm sorry to be a downer, but I didn't think it would happen to me. Frankly, I was arrogant about my health. And when you're arrogant about your health, you don't think anything's going to happen to you. You think you're invincible. And yet when you get punched in the face and all of a sudden this falls apart, you have to be prepared for this stuff. And you have to begin to plan through it. So you got to think about your buy-sell agreements. You got to think about your shareholder plans. You got to think about how are you, if you're thinking about passing this on to your family, how are you going to pass on to your family in a way that is reasonable, that helps them grow into the roles they're going to have to play. Because a lot of times we employ kids, especially family businesses, we employ kids, but we don't teach them to be the next generation of leaders. We kind of hope that they'll get it. We assume that they'll get it, but in many cases they don't get it. They're wondering what to do. And so from my experience to pass on to you, if you could do something, which is start thinking about your succession plan so you've got something to hand off if you do get punched in the face. Final relationship to business, and this one is really important, is fill your war chest. About 5 years ago, Becky and I decided that it was time to do this. And by war chest, we decided that we wanted 3 months of operating capital in our bank account in the event that zero revenue came in for 3 months. If no revenue came in and we stayed with all the same expense load and payroll load, we could cover it for 3 months. Does that make sense? That's what we call a war chest in our world. So we built a 3-month war chest, and then we made our goal to have a 6-month war chest. I heard at one time that Microsoft, and I'm not sure if it's still true today, but Microsoft had a 10-year war chest. Microsoft was able to completely lose all revenue for 10 years, keep all of their staff, and pay the bill. Now, what's interesting about war chest money is when you build a big enough war chest, a lot of people think of war chest as the way to buy another business. We think about war chest as the way to fight the inevitable stuff of life. But something happens when you got a great war chest, is you get profoundly stable. Nothing scares you. Nothing scares you. And so when this happened in our world, one of the cool pieces that was part of a foundation of strength was that we weren't worried if the income stopped. If the income stopped, we could still keep going. And man, that is good stuff to have. That stability, that sense of foundation is really cool. You know what else it allows you to do? Fire clients. You can get rid of clients. You don't have to take clients when you have that kind of money. Someone once called it FU money. Right? But what it does is gives you this profound stability. And so from my perspective to yours, as you think about your business in light of the potential of a black swan in your world, think about at least minimally building 3 months of war chest. Maybe build 6 months of war chest. If you can get to a year, man, you are solid. And when you're talking to people like Vlad will be really impressed. Then you got a war chest. Build that sense of stability for yourself. Okay, so we've talked about professional, we've talked about your business. I want to finally finish with personal. So this is the first one I want to talk about. And this is maybe closer to the heart. There's a place in every disaster that comes in your life where you go, this is not happening to me. This is not happening to me. No, not happening. And there's this fight that emerges. I'm going to fight this. I'm going to take it on. I'm going to fight it. And that's one way to approach it. And some other people do the flight response, which is they run away from it. No, I'm getting away from this. I'm not going to even let this happen to me. And some people just freeze. They go into catatonic state about stuff. And one of the things I learned in this last 6 months was one of the most profound and beneficial ways to deal with crisis in your life is to accept it. Is to actually go, oh yeah, I've got cancer. I have a cancerous tumor growing in my rectum. I've never said rectum as many times in my life as I have the last 6 months. Rectum just comes off my tongue now so easily. It's not an issue to say rectum anymore. And after today's session, you'll probably be okay with saying rectum all day too. Did you hear Tom talk about rectums this morning? But once you gain acceptance, the cool part about gaining acceptance is that instead of not being present to what's there, you become present. So one of the cool things that I had the experience and luxury of doing was actually being present when I went into radiation, because I was willing to accept the fact that I was in radiation. When I took my chemotherapy pills, I would accept them into my body. And this sounds like it's hokey, but you know what? I have had such a profoundly cool experience of this because I've been willing to say, yes, I've got it. I'm experiencing this, and I'm going to be present to it. I was present to the doctors. I was present to the situation. I am present to what's coming out of my stomach right now. I'm there, and it's okay. I'm not fighting it. I'm not trying to pretend it's not happening. I'm not trying to run from it. I'm not trying to be catatonic about it. I am fully aware of what's going on. There is a scar across my abdomen. I feel it, and I'm present to that. And one of the big encouragements I have for you is no matter what you're going through, no matter how deep and intense or difficult or even light right now, learn to practice being present with what is. Learn to practice being present with what is. Nathaniel Branden wrote The 7 Secrets of Self-Esteem, said accepting doesn't necessarily mean liking, enjoying, condoning. Frankly, I don't like this stuff that's happening to me. I don't like it. But I can accept what is and be determined to evolve from there. It is not acceptance, but denial that leaves me stuck. I get stuck when I pretend it's not happening. Jodi Picoult, in her book Handle with Care, said it this way. I love this. I was starting to see what looks like garbage from one angle might be art from another. Maybe it did take a crisis to get to know yourself. Maybe you needed to get whacked hard by life before you understood what you wanted out of it. And one of the coolest things about this process for me is life has taken on this whole new, brand new color, this brand new realness that is so profoundly cool that I can only wish for you that you would get that too. Not the crappy part. This is the second point I want to raise with you. Life isn't happening to you, it's happening for you. Life isn't happening to you, so one of the cool things, if you're willing to accept it, you don't have to be the victim of it. And when life isn't happening to you and it's happening for you, then what you get to do is actually look for the gifts that come as a result, the learning that comes as a result, or the magic that's hidden in the cracks of what shows up. And one of the wonderful things about understanding that life isn't happening to you, it's happening for you, is that as you process your way into specific situations, all of a sudden really cool, amazing things show up in your life. So let me give you one example. I was willing to accept that pain was happening for me, not to me. And so one of the things I tried to do when I was experiencing pain, and rather intense pain, was that I would try to be with the pain. You know what I learned? And then I've done some subsequent research and found this to be true, that pain exists up here, not where it is. There's receptors that go, whoop, right? They come out in your brain. And one of the things I discovered about pain is pain moves. Pain is not present in a specific zone. So if you're willing to get present with pain, and this is my experience, but I'm expressing it to you. If you're willing to get really present with the pain, pain moves around. Pain doesn't just stay there. It goes over here, and then it goes over here, and then it goes away, and then it comes back over there and here. And you know what? That was such cool learning for me. Because as different experiences in the hospital, after I was recuperating, after my digestive system was learning to work again, I was in excruciating pain as my small intestine learned to push food through it. And the pain was brutal. And if you take painkillers, it just stops your digestive system. So nothing moves. So I went, we got to go through this. But what I discovered is as you went through this, the pain didn't stay in a certain place. If you could stick with it, it would come and go, it would come and go, it would come and go. And that was my experience. but it was happening for me, not to me. I wasn't lying there going, oh shit, why is this happening to me? This sucks. And I could go there, but I chose to actually find the magic in those moments and find the strength that actually was sitting inside of me. Finally, I need you. And this might make me cry, so if I cry, I'm sorry. Bear with it. In this room are people who showed up for me in a massive way. They showed up with notes, with cards, with calls, with and there's a bunch of you sitting in this room, and I won't just name you, but you showed up. I have in my possession today, it's sitting right there in my bag, I have 2 of the most precious items from somebody in this room. 2 of their most precious items they sent to give me while I was processing through my stuff. That just blows my mind. It completely blows my mind. There's people who, once they learned of what was going on with me, started sending emails, calling, texting, sending stuff. There are people in this room who went way above and beyond the call of duty. But why I'm telling you that, and why I'm so incredibly grateful for that, is in moments of crisis, when you've been punched in the face, and when you've had a black swan moment, if we don't know you need help, how can we give it? We can't help you. And I have friends and I have people who have gone through deep, intense stuff that missed out on what I have. So let me tell you a quick story. I'm just about to go into surgery. We're lying in the pre-surgery suite, and the surgeon, Dr. Weston, walks in. And Becky and I were sitting there, and we were pretty much all ready, and she had to do some paperwork and check off some things. And I said to Dr. Weston, I said, I think Becky, we both said it somehow, but we said, do you know that there are thousands of people right now who've got your back, woman? You're going to feel electrical energy. There's people praying all over the freaking world for you right now. I hope you know how powerful this is going to be. So if you feel electric shocks coming through your system today, and you're like making cuts you've never made before because your eyes are zeroed in on something so profoundly, precisely, it's because there's all kinds of people. And she's looking at us like, what? What? I'm saying, no, it's happening. Right now, there's people all over the place. And I know that so many of you in this room, there's a company that you would know them if I say them, but every Friday morning, I get, from the whole company, they're praying for me. And there's people in this room, and I've learned about this in after the fact, not while it was happening, but people who have sent good wishes and goodwill and been thinking about me and sending energy and prayers. That man, I am like so completely supported that it's profound. I walk on air and energy that has come from the massive amount of support I've received because I told people. Because I shared it, because I let people know. And if you don't let people know, how can they help you? How can they support you? How can they undergird you with the kind of support that you need in this time? But there's an important caveat to this. And it's this. You got to tell them how you need it. Or you've got to accept what they give and not be resentful. Right? If you put it out in the world that you need help, and they come back with this massive amount of energy, this massive amount of support, there are times that you need to say, I need help in this way. So we have a friend in San Diego. She's a really close friend of ours, and she wanted to come to the hospital, and we had to give her a timeline, right? You can come and spend some time with me for this period, and on top of that, you're going to rub my feet. And she did. Right? Because in that moment, she knew I had no capacity to do this, but I had been handcuffed by these things that try and keep you from having a what is it called? Blood clot. And these things are pumping on my legs, and I feel like I got handcuffs on, and my feet were feeling like whatever. So I just asked her to rub my feet. And you know what? When you expose it, then people know how to respond to it. Anita Shriven, the pilot's wife, I think writes one of the most profound statements, and I love this one. She thought how strange it was that disaster, the sort of disaster that drained the blood from your body and took the air out of your lungs and hit you again and again in the face, could be at times such a thing of beauty. And I can't even express to you what a gift this has been, what a gift you have been to me as my family, that those of you who have supported me in such a profound way. It's been a thing of beauty. I have a life that I've never believed I could have had. I feel more alive today than I've ever. Yeah, I got a lot of stuff left to go, but it's going to be a really cool ride. If you want to read about my story, you can go here, tomadams.com/health. I've written 19 blog posts so far, and I'm going to keep writing about it. And if you're interested in following, you can follow my story. There's 19 there already. I've gone through it quickly. But I hope in some small way, as a result of today, you have a plan if disaster were to strike you. If you get punched in the face, if a black swan shows up in your life, I hope this has helped in some small way to give you a lay of the land. Good luck to you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being a part of this. And God bless.